The navigation panel blinked red for the 7th time in the last hour, and Jake Morrison was doing his best to ignore it. His ship, the Frontier Runner, was 3 days into what should have been a simple supply run to the mining colonies of Arcturus Station. The cargo hold was filled with medical supplies and protein synthesizers. Nothing exciting, nothing dangerous. Just the way Jake liked it. He reached for his coffee mug, finding it empty again. That was the problem with flying solo. Nobody to remind you to eat, sleep, or brew fresh coffee. Nobody to talk to except the ship's computer, which had the personality of a damaged calculator. But that was fine. Jake had chosen this life 2 years ago when he mustered out of the Earth Defense Force. After 15 years of taking orders, watching friends die, and making impossible choices, the silence of space felt like salvation. The red light blinked again, more insistent this time. A distress beacon, automated and repeating. Jake checked the coordinates. Sector 12, a stretch of space so remote that even smugglers avoided it. Nothing out there but asteroids and cosmic dust. Which meant whoever was broadcasting that signal was in serious trouble or setting a trap. Jake drummed his fingers on the control panel, weighing his options. The sensible choice was obvious. Stay on course, deliver the cargo, collect his payment, and forget he ever saw the signal. He had learned the hard way that playing hero usually ended badly. The scar across his ribs was a permanent reminder of that lesson. But the beacon kept calling, an electronic cry for help that wormed its way into his thoughts. He could almost hear his old commander's voice, rough as gravel and twice as hard, asking him what kind of man turned his back on someone in need. The kind who wants to keep breathing, Jake thought. But he was already changing course, his hands moving across the controls with muscle memory from his military days. The journey took 4 hours at full burn. Jake spent the time running diagnostics on his weapon systems, which consisted of 2 outdated plasma cannons and a missile launcher with exactly 3 missiles. Not much, but enough to discourage casual trouble. He also checked his personal sidearm, a heavy pistol that had seen him through more firefights than he cared to remember. The sensor array finally picked up the source. A Xalthian scout vessel, small and sleek, tumbling through space like a broken toy. One engine was completely gone, torn away by something violent. The hull showed blast patterns that Jake recognized immediately. Energy weapons, military grade, and recent enough that the metal still glowed faintly in the infrared spectrum. He maneuvered the Frontier Runner alongside the damaged craft, matching its erratic spin with practiced precision. The docking clamp engaged with a metallic thud that echoed through his ship. Jake grabbed his pistol, checked the charge, and made his way to the airlock. His heart hammered in his chest, adrenaline sharpening his senses the way it always did before potential combat. The airlock cycled open with a hiss of equalizing pressure. What stepped through made Jake forget how to breathe for a moment. She was Xalthian, that much was obvious. Her skin was deep violet, almost purple in the dim lighting, with intricate silver markings that swirled across her face and arms like living tattoos. Her hair fell in thick waves past her shoulders, black with streaks of metallic blue that caught the light. She wore combat armor, form-fitting and clearly expensive, with a sword strapped to her back and a plasma rifle in her hands. But it was her eyes that held him frozen. They were completely silver, no pupils or iris visible, and they seemed to look straight through him, cataloging every detail, every weakness, every potential threat. Jake had seen plenty of aliens during his military service, but none had ever affected him quite like this. "You answered my beacon," she said. Her voice was rich and melodic, with an accent that turned simple words into something almost musical. That makes you either very brave or very foolish. Jake found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. "I've been called both. You want to tell me what happened to your ship?" "Hunters," she replied, lowering her rifle slightly but not entirely. "4 of them. They made the mistake of assuming I would surrender quietly." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "3 of them will not make that mistake again." Jake glanced past her at the airlock, seeing no one else. "You took out 3 hunter ships alone?" "I am Vesrana Tahl, scout and blade dancer of the Xalthian warrior caste." She said it matter-of-factly as if stating the weather. "But the 4th ship damaged my engines before I could engage. Thus my current situation." "Right." Jake tried to process this. Xalthians were known for their combat prowess, but taking on multiple hunters single-handedly was something else entirely. "Well, your ship's dead. I can't tow it and we're 3 days from the nearest station. I can offer you passage to Arcturus. After that, you're on your own." Vesrana studied him for a long moment, those silver eyes unreadable. "Acceptable. I can compensate you for the inconvenience. We'll figure that out later." Jake stepped aside, gesturing toward the corridor. First things first. The Frontier Runner is not a luxury vessel. I've got a cockpit, engine room, cargo bay, and one cabin. My cabin. He paused, suddenly aware of how small his ship was about to feel. There's only one bed. I can sleep in the cargo bay, give you the cabin. It's not much, but it's private. Something shifted in Vesrana's expression, a warmth entering those alien eyes that made Jake's pulse quicken. She stepped closer, moving with a fluid grace that reminded him of flowing water. I appreciate the offer, Jake Morrison. She had read his name from his flight jacket. But I am not afraid of sharing space. We are both adults. We both need rest. Unless you fear I might do something inappropriate? The way she said it, with a slight tilt of her head and the barest hint of amusement in her voice, made Jake's mind go completely blank. He was suddenly very aware of how long it had been since he had been this close to anyone, let alone someone who looked at him like she could see past all his carefully constructed walls. No, he managed. I just thought, cultural differences, personal space, that sort of thing. Vesrana smiled, a real smile this time that transformed her entire face. I have traveled among humans for many years, Jake Morrison. I understand your customs. But where I come from, warriors do not require separate sleeping arrangements to maintain honor. If you are comfortable with the arrangement, so am I. Jake nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He had a feeling the next few days were going to be far more complicated than any cargo run he had ever made. The first night was awkward in ways Jake hadn't anticipated. He showed Vesrana around the ship, a tour that took all of 10 minutes given the Frontier Runner's modest size. She observed everything with quiet intensity, her silver eyes tracking details he had stopped noticing years ago. The worn patches on the pilot's seat. The collection of empty coffee containers he kept meaning to recycle. The photograph magnetically attached to the wall near his bunk, showing a younger version of himself surrounded by smiling faces in military uniforms. Your unit? Vesrana said, not quite a question. Yeah. 3rd Strike Squadron. Jake's voice went flat the way it always did when he talked about the war. Most of them didn't make it past the Battle of Helios Ridge. She was quiet for a moment, then reached up to touch a similar item on her armor, a small crystal pendant that glowed faintly blue. Loss is the burden all warriors carry. We remember so they are never truly gone. Something in the way she said it made Jake look at her differently. Not as the dangerous alien warrior who had killed 3 hunters, but as someone who understood the weight of survival when others hadn't been so fortunate. The cabin's through here, he said, pushing aside memories. Bathrooms small but functional. Water rations are decent since it's just me usually. Help yourself to whatever you need from the galley. Vesrana stepped into the cabin, taking in the single bed that dominated the small space. It was larger than a standard military bunk but still intimate for 2 people who had known each other for less than 4 hours. This will be adequate. Thank you for your hospitality, Jake Morrison. Just Jake is fine. He grabbed a blanket from the storage compartment. I'll be in the cargo bay if you need anything. We're on autopilot for the next 8 hours, so try to get some rest. Jake. Her voice stopped him at the door. When he turned, she was unbuckling her armor, revealing a form-fitting bodysuit beneath that left very little to imagination. His mouth went dry. You do not need to exile yourself to the cargo bay on my account. The bed is sufficient for 2 and you have already done much for me. I will not rob you of comfort in your own ship. Every rational part of Jake's brain screamed that this was a terrible idea. She was a client, a passenger, someone he barely knew. Getting close to people only led to complications and pain. He had built his solitary life specifically to avoid this kind of situation. But standing there, looking at this woman who had fought her way through impossible odds and still offered kindness to a stranger, Jake found his carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. All right, he heard himself say. But I'm warning you, I've been told I snore. I have slept through artillery bombardments, Vesrana replied with that hint of amusement in her voice. I believe I can manage. They settled into an awkward arrangement, Jake on one side of the bed and Vesrana on the other, a careful distance between them. He lay staring at the ceiling, hyper-aware of every breath she took, every slight movement. The violet glow of her skin markings provided a soft illumination in the darkness, creating patterns that shifted with her breathing. You are not sleeping, she observed after 20 minutes of silence. Neither are you. I'm used to being alert. Relaxation does not come easily anymore. She shifted, turning to face him. In the dim light, her silver eyes seemed to capture and reflect what little illumination existed. Tell me something, Jake Morrison. Why does a decorated military pilot choose to haul cargo alone through empty space? Jake considered deflecting, but something about the darkness and her direct question made honesty feel easier. Because out here my decisions only affect me. I got tired of making calls that got good people killed. Easier to be alone than to carry that responsibility. You believe isolation is strength. I believe isolation is survival. Vesrana was quiet for a moment. I thought the same thing once. After my clan was destroyed, I told myself that attachments were weakness. That caring for others only created vulnerabilities my enemies could exploit. I have spent 8 years as a solitary blade, taking contracts, moving from system to system, never staying long enough to form connections. What changed? Nothing changed. That is the problem. Her voice carried a weight he recognized, the exhaustion of someone who had been strong for too long. I became very good at surviving and very poor at living. There is a difference, though it took me years to understand it. Jake turned to face her, their eyes meeting across the small distance. You're saying I should find people to care about? That worked out great last time. I am saying that surviving is not the same as being alive. And we both deserve more than mere survival. The words hung between them, simple and profound. Jake wanted to argue, to defend his choices, but lying there in the darkness with this warrior woman who somehow understood, the arguments felt hollow. Get some rest, Vesrana, he said softly. Long day tomorrow. For you as well, Jake. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in 2 years, the silence didn't feel quite so heavy. The next 2 days fell into an unexpected rhythm. Vesrana proved to be surprisingly easy company once the initial awkwardness faded. She was curious about everything, asking questions about human culture, Earth history, and Jake's experiences with a genuine interest that he found both flattering and unsettling. In return, she shared stories of Xalthia, a world of towering crystal forests and warrior traditions that valued honor above all else. They ate meals together in the small galley, Vesrana adapting easily to human food while introducing Jake to Xalthian traveling rations that tasted like spiced honey and metal. She taught him basic phrases in her language, laughing at his clumsy pronunciation. He showed her how to pilot the Frontier Runner, surprised by how quickly she mastered the controls. At night, they shared the bed with gradually decreasing distance between them. Conversations in the darkness became easier, more personal. Vesrana told him about the clan war that had left her orphaned and driven to become a warrior. Jake found himself talking about Helios Ridge, about the choice that had saved his ship but cost 37 lives on another vessel. You carry guilt for a decision made in impossible circumstances, Vesrana said one night, her hand finding his in the darkness. Her skin was warm, almost hot to the touch. This is the nature of command. But punishing yourself accomplishes nothing except wasting the life they died to preserve. Her fingers intertwined with his, and Jake didn't pull away. You make it sound simple. It is not simple. It is necessary. There is a difference. She squeezed his hand gently. You are a good man, Jake Morrison. Even if you have convinced yourself otherwise. On the 4th day everything changed. They were 2 days from Arcturus Station when the proximity alarm shrieked. Jake bolted from the galley to the cockpit, Vesrana right behind him. The sensor display showed 3 ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel directly in their path. Pirates, Jake muttered, fingers flying across the weapons console. Probably the same ones who hit your ship. Must have tracked your beacon signal. Can we outrun them? Not a chance. The Frontier Runner is tough but slow. He activated the plasma cannons, knowing they would be hopelessly outgunned. I'm open to suggestions. Vesrana studied the tactical display, her expression shifting into something cold and calculating. The lead ship has weak shielding on the port side. If you can get us close enough for a weapons lock, I can board them. That's insane. You'll be killed. I am Xalthian. Boarding actions are what we train for. She was already moving toward the airlock, retrieving her sword and rifle. Trust me, Jake. I have done this before. Everything in Jake's training screamed against this plan. But looking at Vesrana, seeing the absolute confidence in her silver eyes, he made a choice. Not the safe choice, not the smart choice. The choice that meant trusting someone else again. All right. But we do this together. I'm not letting you board alone. She smiled, fierce and beautiful. Then let us show these hunters why they should have stayed home. The battle was brief and violent. Jake pushed the Frontier Runner into a reckless dive that brought them within meters of the lead pirate ship. Vesrana launched herself through the airlock with a grace that defied physics, Jake following with his pulse pounding and his pistol ready. They fought side by side through the pirate vessel's corridors. Vesrana moved like poetry written in violence, her sword singing through the air as she cut down opponents with surgical precision. Jake provided covering fire, his military training snapping back into place as if he had never left the service. When they returned to the Frontier runner, leaving the crippled pirate ships behind, they were both breathing hard, splattered with alien blood, and more alive than either had felt in years. That, Vesrana said, pulling off her helmet, was exceptional teamwork. Jake laughed, the sound surprising him. You're absolutely crazy, you know that? Perhaps. But you followed me anyway. She stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her skin. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for being worth trusting. The distance between them evaporated. When Vesrana kissed him, it felt like something breaking open inside Jake's chest, all the walls he had built crumbling under the simple truth that he didn't want to be alone anymore. Her lips were soft and warm, tasting faintly of the spiced rations they had shared. His hands found her waist, pulling her closer. They made their way back to the cabin, shedding armor and clothing between kisses and breathless laughter. The morning light from Arcturus Station's sun filtered through the cabin viewport, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Jake woke slowly, becoming aware of warmth pressed against his side. Vesrana lay curved against him, her violet skin luminous in the morning light, silver markings tracing patterns across her shoulders like living art. Her breathing was deep and even, one hand resting on his chest. For the first time in 2 years, Jake felt completely at peace. No nightmares, no guilt gnawing at his consciousness, just the simple contentment of being exactly where he wanted to be. He traced a finger along one of the silver markings on her shoulder, following its intricate path. Vesrana stirred, silver eyes opening to meet his. A slow smile spread across her face. Good morning, Jake Morrison. Good morning. He brushed a strand of metallic blue hair from her face. Sleep well. Better than I have in years. She stretched like a cat, all fluid grace and unconscious sensuality. Though I suspect you had something to do with that. They lay there for a while, neither wanting to acknowledge what the morning meant. Arcturus Station was 3 hours away. 3 hours until they docked, until Vesrana would leave to find transport to wherever her next contract took her, until Jake would return to his solitary cargo runs. The thought of it felt wrong, like trying to breathe underwater. We should talk about what happens next, Vesrana said quietly, echoing his thoughts. We cannot simply ignore the reality of our situations. Jake sat up, running a hand through his hair. I know. You have your contracts, your warrior obligations. I have cargo routes and a ship to maintain. This was just a brief intersection, right? Ships passing and all that. Is that what you want? She sat up as well, the sheet falling away. For this to be a brief intersection? He turned to look at her, really look at her. This warrior woman who had crashed into his life and turned everything upside down. Who had reminded him what it felt like to care about something beyond mere survival. Who had looked at all his broken pieces and hadn't flinched. No, he said honestly. No, that's not what I want at all. Then what do you want, Jake? It was the simplest question in the universe and the most complicated. What did he want? For 2 years, he had wanted nothing except to be left alone, to fly his routes in peace, to avoid the pain that came with caring about people. But Vesrana had shattered that careful isolation, and now the thought of going back to it felt unbearable. I want you to stay, he said. I want to see where this goes, whatever this is. I want morning coffee with someone who actually talks back. I want to teach you more about piloting and learn more about Xalthian blade dancing. I want to stop running from the possibility of caring about someone. Vesrana's expression softened. That is a significant change from the man who planned to sleep in his cargo bay to avoid sharing a cabin. Yeah, well, you have that effect on people apparently. He reached for her hand. But I'm also realistic. You're a warrior, a blade dancer. You have a reputation, contracts, a whole life. I can't ask you to give that up for some cargo pilot you've known for less than a week. You are not asking. I am choosing. She squeezed his hand. Jake, I have spent 8 years taking contracts that meant nothing, fighting battles that served no purpose except to earn credits and maintain my reputation. I convinced myself that purpose was enough. But these past few days with you have shown me something different. What's that? That there is more to life than surviving from one contract to the next. That connection is not weakness. That perhaps the strongest thing a warrior can do is choose to be vulnerable. She moved closer, her free hand cupping his face. You were not the only one running, Jake Morrison. You were simply more honest about it. He leaned into her touch. So what do we do? I have contracts to fulfill, cargo runs scheduled for the next 3 months. You presumably have people hunting you, given those bounty hunters. The hunters were a complication, nothing more. The contract on me expired 2 months ago, but word travels slowly in some circles. Vesrana smiled. As for what we do, I propose a partnership. You need someone to handle security on your cargo runs. The outer systems are becoming increasingly dangerous. I need transport and a reason to stop taking contracts that slowly destroy my spirit. It seems mutually beneficial. You want to be my security specialist? I want to be your partner in all ways. She kissed him softly. If you will have me. Jake felt something unfold in his chest, warm and terrifying and wonderful all at once. This was the moment he could pull back, could choose the safe path of solitude, could protect himself from the possibility of future pain. But looking at Vesrana, seeing the hope and vulnerability in her silver eyes, he realized he didn't want safe anymore. Yeah, he said, pulling her into his arms. Yeah, I'll have you. They kissed again, deeper this time, a promise sealed without words. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. We should probably get dressed before we dock, Jake said reluctantly. Pretty sure showing up at Arcturus Customs looking like this would cause some questions. Practical. Vesrana slipped out of bed with that fluid grace, already reaching for her clothes. Though I will miss the lack of clothing. Station rules say we have to wear clothes in public spaces. They say nothing about private cabins on ships. An excellent point. I shall remember that for future reference. They dressed in comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who have moved past awkwardness into genuine intimacy. Jake found himself stealing glances at her, still half convinced this was some elaborate dream his lonely mind had constructed. Stop looking at me like I might vanish, Vesrana said without turning around. How did you know I was looking? I am a trained warrior. I am always aware of my surroundings. She turned, fully dressed in clean combat attire she had salvaged from her damaged ship. But also you are not subtle. Never claimed to be. They made their way to the cockpit, where Arcturus Station dominated the forward viewport. The massive orbital facility glittered with thousands of lights, ships of every size and configuration moving in carefully controlled patterns around it. Jake had docked here dozens of times, but today it looked different. Less like another lonely stop on an endless route and more like the beginning of something new. Arcturus Station, this is Frontier Runner requesting docking clearance, he transmitted. Cargo delivery plus 1 passenger. Frontier Runner, you are cleared for Bay 17. Welcome back, Captain Morrison. The docking procedure was smooth and familiar. Jake guided the ship through the approach pattern, feeling Vesrana's presence beside him like a physical warmth. She had taken the co-pilot seat without asking, as if she belonged there. As if this had always been her place. As they descended toward the docking bay, Jake's communication panel lit up with an incoming message. He frowned, not recognizing the code. That's odd. I'm not expecting any messages. What is it? Vesrana leaned over to look at the display. Jake opened the message, then felt his blood run cold. It was a job offer, but not for cargo. A mercenary contract, exactly the kind of high-risk, high-reward mission he would have refused 2 years ago. But the details made him pause. It is a rescue mission, Vesrana read over his shoulder. Civilian transport stranded in hostile territory. Payment sufficient to upgrade your ship's entire defense grid. She looked at him. This is the kind of contract I would normally take alone. And probably get yourself killed. Perhaps. Or perhaps I would succeed and earn enough to survive another few months. She touched his shoulder. But I am no longer alone, am I? Jake stared at the message, feeling the weight of choice settling on him. The safe option was right there. Deliver his cargo, collect his payment, continue the scheduled runs. Ignore the message and avoid risk. But he wasn't that man anymore. That man would have never answered Vesrana's distress beacon. That man would have slept in the cargo bay and kept his walls intact. That man was gone, replaced by someone who had remembered what it meant to care, to fight for something beyond mere survival, to trust another person with his life. We should take it, he said. Vesrana's eyes widened slightly. You're certain? This is not a simple cargo run, Jake. People could die. We could die. I'm certain. Besides, you need someone to watch your back, and apparently I'm volunteering. He brought the ship down to a smooth landing, then turned to face her fully. We're partners now, right? That means we face risks together. She smiled, fierce and proud. Together then. Though I should warn you, once you start taking these kinds of contracts, peaceful cargo runs may seem dull in comparison. Good thing I've got an exciting partner to keep things interesting. They sealed the ship and prepared to disembark. As the airlock cycled open and the sounds and smells of Arcturus Station flooded in, Jake felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Not just contentment or peace but actual excitement for the future. Vesrana took his hand as they walked down the boarding ramp, her fingers intertwining with his. Around them the station bustled with activity. Traders shouting prices, ships launching and docking, the endless flow of life in a hub city of space. But Jake only had eyes for the woman beside him. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now we deliver the cargo, accept that rescue contract, probably nearly die, save some people, collect our payment and upgrade the ship's defenses." He squeezed her hand. "Then we find another contract and another after that. We build something together, one job at a time." "That sounds acceptable." Vesrana paused, pulling him to a stop in the middle of the busy corridor. People flowed around them like water around stones. "Jake Morrison, I want you to know something. These past days with you have given me more joy than the previous 8 years combined. Whatever happens from this moment forward, I will not regret choosing to stay." "Same here." He pulled her close, kissing her in full view of dozens of strangers who didn't care about one human and one Xalthian showing affection. "Welcome aboard the Frontier Runner, partner. I think this is going to be one hell of a journey. I would expect nothing less." They walked into the station together, two people who had been alone finding strength in unity, carrying weapons and hope in equal measure. Behind them, the Frontier Runner sat waiting in its bay, no longer a vessel of isolation but a home for two warriors learning to live again. The future was uncertain, probably dangerous, and absolutely full of possibility. And for the first time in years, Jake Morrison was looking forward to it.